Hello there, kia ora. Chances are you've seen the announcement that your power bills are going to go up again to pay for an LNG storage facility in Taranaki to pick up the load in power production when needed. It's genuinely mind-blowing how much misdirection has gone into this one announcement, from the semantics over what to call the extra cost to the way it's being justified and parroted by mainstream media. So let's start with how we got here. Basically, the wholesale cost of power keeps going up. It's been used as a reason why a number of plants have shut down in the middle of the Waikato, for example. And we rely on water a lot to power our hydro dams, which make the vast majority of our power supply, and wind power to power our wind turbines. One bad drought, which brings on a lack of water and wind, and that impacts our power supply quite significantly. So the government has been looking for ways to combat energy production in what we call a dry year, because it's the one impact of climate change they selectively believe will happen, more dry weather, because it allows them then also to justify criticising Labour's ban on oil and gas exploration. The Coalition's answer to this dry year problem is to build an LNG terminal to store a fossil fuel known as liquid natural gas. As a polluter, it's less impactful than coal, but it has a massive carbon and methane footprint, much higher than domestic natural gas. 3 times higher actually than the domestic stuff. And the Coalition blame Labour for needing to do this because they banned new oil and gas exploration in mid-2018. And this is the official narrative, and it selectively ignores a lot of factors, like the timeline of production decline before the ban and exploration stalling, where only 5 sites were even explored in the 3 years before the ban, and no new oil or gas fields had been discovered in the decade before the ban, and how it takes 10 to 20 years lead time to go from permit to gas flowing into the grid if you discover something, that existing permits weren't touched, and that they were dealing with record underperformance of key gas and oil fields. Basically, we're running out of natural gas, and no matter how often you poke around in an empty cupboard, it doesn't magically make Kai appear, and even if you found some, it would still be at least 2038 before we saw any impact on our energy production sector. So no matter who was in government, we needed to look at options for dealing with a dry year. So, Luxon's facetious claim that they will be investing in energy and electricity in this country and he won't apologise for hard choices is designed to make it look like he's the brave leader who won't be vilified for doing the thing that would need to be done anyway. The difference is he chose to go the route of a fossil fuel pollutant, while Labour had already started work on the Lake Onslow battery project for the same reason, which he cancelled. So Luxon cancelled a renewable energy project in favour of a polluting one so that he could play the victim and the hero and charge us more for it with the introduction of a levy, or a tax. We'll get into that. But the media spin on this has already begun. That well-known lefty media outlet Radio New Zealand ran this story on Tuesday, framing it as a both sides argument, then proceeding to begin by platforming the head of a fossil fuel lobby group called Energy Resources Aotearoa. Up until 2021, they were actually known as the Petroleum Exploration and Production Association of New Zealand, and funded by oil companies like Mobil and the largest gas user in the country, Methanex, both of whom have seats on their board. This isn't mentioned in the article, but they again used the blame Labour lines and the Coalition version of trickle-down economics, downward pressure, and their perspective takes up the first third of this article, which is how far 85% of readers get through a written news story and base their perspective on the information contained in that area. This is also very similar to the approach in 2025's Australian election, where fossil fuel lobbyists paid millions to influence media before the election. And ERA has never heard an announcement from New Zealand First's Shane Jones it hasn't put out a press release supporting. What's also been downplayed significantly, and media has pointed this out, is a report done into the energy resilience field called the Frontier Report for the government, done in October last year, which warned that this exact move should be a very last resort. The report also suggested selling off government ownership of gentailers, amalgamating 29 different electricity distribution businesses, and removing electricity from the emissions trading scheme, which the government also chose to ignore, but again chose to blame Labour for the scenario that they found themselves in. There's also been no mention of US interests in LNG exports specifically, and claims of favourable treatment for countries buying US LNG from the Trump administration. And all while all of this is being justified by claiming that we need to prepare for a dry year, it ignores other recommendations into quickly enabled renewable options, particularly solar. Unlike Australia, solar installation on residential properties here isn't common, but that $1 billion investment being spent on this facility could be used to pay for 1 in every 40 homes to have solar fully funded with batteries, or much more if that money was used to subsidise installation. $1 billion investment would double our current solar footprint, lower costs for households, won't have a cost attached for fuel because the sun is still free, there's near zero emissions, and have approximately the same lifespan as this LNG facility. So the argument for the need for the facility to bring in and store high-polluting fossil fuels is built on shaky, selective data at best, with a side of the coalition's inability to take responsibility for its own choices and playing the victim for those choices, while ignoring evidence-based decision-making that might make the world a little bit better in favour of clearly corporate and hard right-wing international interests. And at the end of all of that, we also have the really basic lie about how it's being paid for by a levy, which isn't a tax apparently, because National takes every opportunity to vilify the left over taxes, so it can't introduce one itself. But a tax is an income stream for a government, and a levy introduced by a government is still an income stream, just one that's usually earmarked specifically for a purpose. Not all taxes are government levies, but all government levies are a type of tax. These include the road user charges for electric vehicles, the license portion of car registrations, the International Visitor Conservation and Tourism Levy, visa price increases, low-value goods levy, empty container levies, commercial vessels levies, and the UPU mail import levies, waste disposal levy expansions, and offshore pension transfer charges. All additional income streams that the coalition introduced or increased. Therefore, all additional tax income for the government from the party that tries to vilify the left over taxes. So the LNG terminal, it's a clearly backwards idea being celebrated by clearly influenced partisan parties set to make bank off it, while screwing over future generations, ignoring other data-led options to deal with a crisis manufactured in part to justify the whole process because the option the coalition inherited wasn't going to help their supporters profit enough. Oh, hey there, podcast listeners. Thanks for checking out today's podcast, whether that's on video or audio. I really appreciate it. And I did finally get around to doing a podcast end tag, which I've been meaning to do for a while instead of just taking you onto the Facebook version. So while you're here, why not hit that subscribe button so that you can get updates coming in directly every time there's a new episode uploaded. Just seems like a really simple way to keep up to date with all of the crazy that's going on. So yeah, give that a shot and I'll talk to you soon.